everyone, welcome to our latest Booktrib live chat. Today we are really excited to be speaking with Anne Trager, an American translator and editor and the founder of Le French Book, which is a company that brings France's best mysteries, thrillers, and short stories to new readers across the English-speaking world. Thank you so much for joining us today, Anne. It's great to have you here.
Hi, I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So I also want everyone to know, before we begin our questions, that we are giving away a copy of Shadow Ritual. And this is the first in a series which is internationally best-selling series. It's an electrifying thriller, and it's by Eric Giacometti and Jacques Raven. And so please stop by after and go to Booktrib and enter to win, and someone will be receiving a lovely copy of this great book. So Anne, can you tell us a little bit more about Le French Book and how it all got started?
Yes, it got started a few years ago. I've been living in France for a really long time ago, and a few years ago, I realized that I needed to do something about two of my obsessions, and one of my obsessions is mysteries and thrillers, and the other is France. And I was having trouble because I couldn't share the mysteries and thrillers I was reading in French with all of my friends and family and other people in America, and this was really frustrating to me. And since I had a long-standing background in translation and in publishing and also in communications, I thought, well, if this is a problem for me, I better do something about it. And so that's what I did. I founded Le French Book, and I thought that this was how I could contribute to sharing something from France, which I love very much, and these stories I love.
Absolutely. Now, how do you choose your books for Le French Book? What's that process like?
First of all, we have to love the book. Okay, so there are a few of us who read books, and then when we find something that we really enjoy, that has to be the first criteria. We're really looking for providing entertaining stories. One of the things in translation is that for a long time, you just saw very literary stories and not a lot of commercial fiction. Well, I love commercial fiction. So for me, it was important to really do commercial fiction, to do these mysteries and thrillers. And we look for a diversity. So we look for the French, they have a tradition, they're very known for doing the noir, the very dark social justice kinds of mysteries. But that's not all they do. That's just what was translated previously. And so if you look at our catalog, you'll see that we do a cozy series. It's a cozy wine series. So not only is it something different that we haven't seen from France before, although they do exist in France, but there is a connection because there is a bridge between France and the readers who are not from France, and that's the wine. Because if you think of France, what do you think of? Generally, one of the first things you think about is the wine. So we have the Winemaker Detective series, which is a cozy series. We also have a police procedural series, the Paris Homicide series, which is set in Paris, which is another way to create a bridge for readers. Because as the authors are all French, they're going to have a perspective that is just slightly different from, for example, a U.S. author who is writing a story set in France. So it's important for us when we choose these books that there is this connection.
So you spoke a little bit about, what the French like in their mysteries and thrillers, but what are some other ways that European mysteries and thrillers are different than American mysteries and thrillers?
I think this is an interesting topic. I think that every writer is going to have their own story to tell. So we know that every writer is different, but that story stems from a culture. It stems from, references, social references, and historical references, and what they learn in school. And so These are things that will feed into a story and will make the story both different from a story from another culture, but also give insight into that actual culture. So this is one of the things that you're going to see. At the same time, a good story is a good story. So you can't, it's hard to say that you cannot say there is a French kind of mystery or a French kind of story or literature. I don't think you can. I think because you're going to have all those different variables that come in. But for example, if I go back to the winemaker detective series, in Deadly Tasting, we're going to one of the plot aspects, one of the parts of the mysteries relates to World War II. Well, you get a lot about World War II, but this was something that I've lived in France for a very long time, and I know a lot about French history. I didn't even know, and French people don't often know about how the wine industry was affected in Bordeaux during World War II. And so it's interesting because it brings a whole different perspective on these stories.
What is it like for you? You know, you lived there for a long time, but you are still, you know, you're from America, and it's, you know, kind of like outside looking in. What's that like? It must be, you must see things in a different way all the time. New perspective.
Yes.
Yeah. The short answer, yeah.
I mean, I agree with you. I think that you do, and I think that that's one of the interesting things about this business venture is that not only is that I'm not a French person choosing French mysteries for American readers. I'm an American person choosing French mysteries for an American reader.
Right.
And it's a very different perspective. And I'll find it, I can tell the difference because I work with all of the major French publishers, and they're constantly proposing books to me that, you know, say, oh, do you want to publish this? And some of the books that they suggest are not necessarily the ones I would choose. And again, it's because I have a perspective that is rooted in my own culture. And I'm hoping that the stories we bring then will appeal to these readers.
Yeah. Something interesting that I've noticed is with even our romance authors that we interview, or any type of author that you know, prints in other countries, there's always different covers and different ways that the countries market the covers. Do you keep the French covers when you market to U.S. readers? Do you keep the original? Or do
No, that's a funny question because in French mystery and thriller publishing, basically they have either a white or a black cover with the name of the title on it. So it's or actually there's a collection that has black with yellow around it, and these are very typical. And when a French reader will see that cover, they'll know immediately that it is a mystery book. And they'll know exactly what publisher it comes from, and they'll know exactly what the feeling of that particular, you know, collection is going to be about. But there are basically 3 different kinds of covers, and maybe occasionally you get a little picture down at the bottom. I'm exaggerating a little because it's changing a little, but it would be very hard for me to put out a cover like that in the U.S. You know, I can see the bookseller saying, "Oh, what are you doing?" You know, it's not going to jump out among all of the other covers. Well, maybe it would, but I wasn't wanting to do that. I didn't think that was the way to go.
That's really interesting. Marley has a question that just popped up. She says, what's the biggest challenge you face when you're adapting French literature into English-speaking books? What do you find is the most challenging?
I think that's a hard question because every story, again, is different. I keep coming back to the fact that every story is different and every story will present certain challenges.
Certain quirks.
One of the things that I find is that the French publishing houses do not have the same editorial tradition. And so, you know, when the French will take an American thriller or story and translate it into French. They're always, I've talked to them about this, and they'll say, "Oh yeah, there's so much detailed description of people," and apparently, and the French don't do that. When they write a story, they don't write it in the same way. So what I would say is that it's dealing with backstory, is that they don't edit the backstory in the same way, for example. And so when I adapt, I have to make sure that it's not too heavy on the backstory, you know? And, for example, that's one of the things that I've noticed. Now, obviously not every book is the same, but I've noticed that that's something that we have to deal with. Now, I'm really lucky because I work with the authors. I want to work with authors who are living and who are involved in their writing still. And I call them up and we sit down and we have coffee and we talk about their book. And then when we translate it, I go back and forth with them because for me it's important that their story gets across to the reader.
Right.
And there are certain things that we have to, you know, that we like to change for that to happen, okay? But I only do it while working with the author, and we'll talk it over and we'll try to find the best solutions. Also, some of the books came out a little later, you know, a while ago because of the translation. And so we always have the question, do we bring it up to date? Do we bring it into now or don't we? And that's something that we work on with the authors. And so it's a really, really interesting challenge. I mean, Eric Giacometti and Jacques Raven, the authors of The Shadow Ritual, you know, they've sold 2 million books around the world. You know, these are, I mean, I get a little nervous when I go and, you know, when I called them up the first time, I was like, oh, you know, these are real stars. In France, they're on television every other week and, you know, they're doing their thing. They're very successful. And so, you know, I called them up and we sat down and we talked about how are we going to adapt this, you know, so that the story reaches the audience. It's an interesting series because it's got a Freemason cop and he's the central character. And so you get all this inside information about French Freemasonry, which is very different than Freemasonry in the United States. And it's also this secret society that I as a translator, and I translated that book myself. I had a fabulous time translating that book. It was really, really fun. But I had to learn so much about that as well in order to translate it. And so those are some of the challenges that we face.
Yeah. So every book has its own quirks and kind of new surprises.
Oh, and there's one, keep going back to the wine series, but I love that series. But there are so many words in French for wine barrel, you would not, you know, or various sizes of barrels, okay? So you have to figure out what size a wine barrel or vat or whatever they're talking about, and then there aren't that many words in English for that. But, you know, that's...
Right. Yeah, Kate asked a question. She says, I love the Winemaker Detective series. Can you talk about those books and your experience translating them? Is there anything else you remember that was just an interesting tidbit about those? I'm sure there's many things.
Oh, well, I love this series because the characters keep evolving. And you have a really interesting dynamic between the older winemaker, who's the winemaker detective, and his younger assistant. And then you watch them evolve. One of the quirks of that, I don't know. One of the interesting aspects of it is that each story is going to talk about actual wines and an actual wine region. And, you know, there's one where Benjamin Cooker, the winemaker detective, will stay in a hotel. Well, it's a real hotel, and I actually went there, and I stayed there, and I stayed in the same room. It was really fun. And you can do that. And if you go to the Loire Valley, I highly recommend you do that, because it's a fabulous little hotel. So you can actually take those winemaker detective stories and use them as travel guides. I mean, I've done it either from your couch or as actual travel guides and going to visit the places in it. And that's a really fun part of that series. So when we translate them, then we also do a lot of research on those different places so that we make sure that they come across really well as they do in French, but to readers who are not familiar with them.
Yeah. So how many words are there total for wine barrel in French?
Yeah,
And how do you choose,
I actually
like,
I haven't done
that's
the actual
amazing.
count, but I do know that every time one of those books comes through, you always come across another word, and or there's another size of barrel, or it depends on, yeah, there's a,
That's
I'll
awesome.
have to actually calculate someday, but.
So how do you pick the word that you're going to use? Just how it sounds? Just, it's so interesting.
Well, sometimes you have to be just very accurate, because every time that another word is used, it's used for a specific region. It could be the size, it could be the region.
Yeah.
Sometimes, sometimes you just say barrel because you don't want to distract from the story, and sometimes then you have to say, well, a such and so many liter, vat, because it is pertinent to the story. So we try to choose to keep the story moving forward, and if it provides information to the story.
Right. Now, I thought it was really interesting your beginning in France. If we could back up a little bit and just tell everyone kind of how you ended up in France and what you were doing there.
Yeah, I mentioned the word obsession a little early on because I tend to function based on my obsessions. And at the time when I moved to France, I was obsessed with food. And so I
Hmm.
came to train as a chef in France. And I did that a very, very long time ago. And I stayed and I did a lot of cooking, and I was very involved in the food world before I got really involved in translation,
Hmm.
um, as a whole. So that's
Hmm.
how I got started in France. And I just love the language, and I love the
Yeah.
country, and I couldn't
Yeah.
leave. So,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I hear you. I love it there. Um, do you have any advice for someone trying to, immerse themselves in a new culture and, learn a language, like actually learn it and stick with it?
I think that immersion is really important. That actually going and spending time in the culture with the people and trying to speak the language because everybody appreciates it, is really the only way to learn the language, truly. One thing that does help, and I'm constantly telling this to French people who want to learn English, but it can work the other way around, is to take a film that you like. I tell French people if they want to learn English, they should take the movie in English and watch it with English subtitles. So if you want to
Good
learn
idea.
French, then you should take a movie in French and watch it with French subtitles on. And that way it
Mm-hmm.
really helps to actually learn the language. It really does work very, very well. But there's nothing like actually spending time, totally just jumping in and trying and making mistakes. I mean,
Right.
I have this story when my very first year in France, I'd been in France about 2 weeks, and I go to the Loire Valley, and I was visiting one of the castles in Blois, and it started pouring down rain, really tons and tons of rain, and I couldn't figure out how to get back to the train station.
Oh no.
And the word for train station in French is gare. And
Hmm.
I was under an awning outside a shop, and there was this little old lady, and I walked up to her and I said, please, please, où se trouve la guerre? And so what I said is, where is the guerre? And guerre is the word for war. Okay? So I was saying to her, where is the war? Okay? Instead of saying, where is the train station? And and she looked at me with these huge eyes. And of course, her age was, she'd probably been there during the war, okay?
She's like,
And
long
she
time
was
ago.
looking at me. I was like, where's the war? Where's the war? And I had no
Oh,
idea. No idea. And then she started laughing and laughing and laughing. And she calls over her son and her, daughter-in-law and whoever it was, and they all started looking and laughing at me, and then put me in the car and drove me to the train station. And I think when they dropped me off at the train station, I understood And I was terribly embarrassed, but at the same time, that's how you learn. I will never forget. I mean, from that time on, I knew how to say the word, both of those words very well.
You have a great story out of it too. That's great. Um, Alex wants to know, how do people find Le French Book? How do they hear about it? Can we find you online? What's your website? Do you have Twitter, or do you do a lot of through word of mouth?
So we do have a website. It's www.lefrenchbook.com, and there we have a blog. We are also on
Great.
Twitter, Le French Book. We have a Facebook page. We try to keep the information going through those channels. And we hope that people will keep talking about us, because the more people talk about us and the more, we spread the word, then the more books we'll be able to translate, basically.
Right. Absolutely. Now, Allie has some great questions. She says, first of all, on average, how long does it take you to read and translate each book?
So from the time we make a decision to the time the book comes out, it takes about a year. The actual translation process is not as long. It depends on the translators. I don't translate all the books myself. We have other translators, translators who have also other projects on board. So
Right.
I usually try to count about 6 months for a translation. It depends on the length of the book. It's nice if the usually it takes really seriously about 3 months to translate a book. Just the translation part, sometimes a little less, sometimes a little more.
And she also wants to know, what's the most rewarding thing about the work that you're doing? If you can nail it down to one.
Yeah, if I can nail it down to one thing. There is something really, really rewarding. Here, getting reader feedback is really, really rewarding. When somebody, writes on Facebook or Twitter or an email or somehow, or, posts a review on Amazon or whatever they do,
Right.
where they say what they thought about the book. That's really rewarding for us, because it's a lot of hard work for us to get these books out there, and just to know that people are actually reading them and enjoying them is just really fabulous. That for us is why we're doing it.
Mm-hmm. Susan wants to know, are you fluent in any other languages? And have you ever thought about translating other types of books?
I used to speak a little Chinese, and I spent some time in China, but I don't have a level of language that is sufficient to do anything else with that. And then, French is enough to keep me busy.
Yeah, exactly. Susan has another interesting question. She says, what about French comic books? Would you ever delve into that world to translate them? Are they popular in France? Is that like a big
They're
thing?
very popular in France. There's a huge culture and world around comic books. I think that would be really, really interesting to do. And if I could translate all of the books I wanted to translate, I would be a really, really much happier person. I'm already pretty happy because I'm doing what I love. But that's fabulous. If we could do that in the future, that would be great.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Now, we mentioned the Shadow Ritual giveaway, and Kristen says, Shadow Ritual looks so good. Can you tell us a little bit about what that's about, for anyone who is not, familiar with that?
Yes, so it's the story of, so you have these ritual murders that are being committed. One is in Rome and one is in Jerusalem. And the main character, Antoine Marcasse, gets called in. He's an inspector. He's in France. And he's in Rome because he is a Freemason and he's visiting a Freemason lodge there. And he gets called into the French embassy, well, he's invited to a party at the French embassy in Rome, and one of the murders takes place there. And his buddy who invited him to the party asks him for help because he's a homicide detective. And that's where he meets the second protagonist, whose name is Jade, and she is in charge of security at the embassy. And so they immediately are in conflict. And they are going to get asked by the French diplomatic powers that be to investigate this murder and figure out what happened, but to do it under the, it's a black ops kind of thing, because we don't want word to get out that there was a murder happening, that a murder happened at the French embassy, right? So they then try to uncover why this woman was murdered. They learn about the other ritual murders, and they learn that there are connections to Freemasonry, but also to other secret societies. And then their whole journey is going to be to uncover what's going on. And it's a very fast-paced story, and you do a lot of traveling in it. It's very international, and it's really a lot of fun. And I can't really say any more because I'll give it away.
Right. Not too much. We just had a question come in from Connie, and she probably just popped in to say hello, and she didn't hear about your website, but she wants to know, where do you sell your books? So if we can share, where we can find them. She's interested in knowing.
We're really lucky. We have a very large distributor, which means that our books can be found in bookstores all over the country. They are also distributed in Canada. Just the print books, you can find them, of course, on the major online retail sites. And you can order them, like I said, from any bookstore, and some actually keep them in stock. So let's see, where else can you find them? And they're available in ebook format. Many of our books are also available in audiobook format. We do a lot of them through Audible. So basically, and that was one of our goals when we founded Le French Book, was to be able to make our books available in every possible format we could find and have them distributed as widely as possible. And so you can even get our print books anywhere else in the world. That is a possibility as well.
Excellent. Felicity wants to know what inspires you besides France. And she says, do you have a favorite book or author?
What inspires me? Chocolate.
Yes.
Dark chocolate. Inspires me. Do I have a favorite? No, seriously, that's my serious answer.
It gets you
going. And a favorite book or author, Michael Connelly, Lee Child.
Great one. Yeah.
Yeah, those are two of my absolute favorites. There we go. And the thing that keeps me sane is martial arts.
Oh, awesome. Amazing. Now we're coming up to some of the last questions. So it goes by so fast. What are you working on next?
So we are bringing out a few summer reads, and they'll be out in August. So we'll have a new winemaker detective out in August, and it takes place in Armagnac. It's called Flambé in Armagnac. So we're excited about that. Another adventure for the winemaker detective and his assistant. We have a book by a new author for us. Her name is Anne-Laure Thieblemont. And the book is called The Collector, and it's a mystery that's set in the world in Paris, in the art world. So you have the auctions and the buyers and appraisers and counterfeiters and fences and the whole white collar crime scene. So that's really interesting. We're excited about that. She is an art reporter and a gemologist, so she's really knows her stuff. We also have, we're doing a winemaker detective omnibus for the holidays, where we'll bring together a number of the winemaker detective stories.
Neat.
Yeah, we thought it would make a really good holiday gift for, Christmas and Christmas time. We have a few more winemaker detective stories that are in the works. I'm working on the translation of the second book, after the Shadow Ritual. We have a lot in the works. We have a new author coming out. Oh yeah, I'm really excited about this. It's a classic, hard-boiled PI story written by a French author, so a different perspective, and set in Africa, in French-speaking Africa, in Mali. And so I'm really excited about that. That comes out in fall. And I am personally right now busy reading lots of books to figure out what we're going to be doing next year.
So you guys are extremely busy. You have your hands full. It's good to
Oh,
hear.
yeah.
So we have one more question from Audrey. She says, there must be some exquisite bookshops in France. Do you have any favorites or favorite places to visit with a book in hand? So it's kind of two questions. Favorite bookshop, favorite place to read?
So there is an incredible bookshop in Toulouse, which is called Ombre Blanche. That's white shadows, if you want the translation. And it's located right near the central Place du Capitole, and it's a beautiful, beautiful bookshop. But you're going to find bookshops like that all over France. There's one, and I wish I could remember the name of it right now. It's in Paris. It's right near the Sèvres Babylon metro station, and it's a kids bookshop which has the most incredible children's books. And it's got these huge picture windows outside with all these wonderful children's books in it. And I'm sorry, if the person wants more information, they can send me a little email and I will find the name of that bookstore, because it's so beautiful.
Awesome.
And then of course you have some great English language bookstores in Paris. I mean, there's Shakespeare and Company, of course, and there's W.H. Smith. I mean, there are all kinds of places too.
Amazing. I want to go there right now and check them out. And I just wanted to thank you again for joining us, and everybody watching, stop by booktrib.com after the chat and enter to win a copy of Shadow Ritual. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Take care.